Hello, you're watching Health Day now. I'm Mabel Jong. 96% of schools are open after the winter holiday break, compared with 46% in January 2021. But thousands of schools around the country have already shifted to or are contemplating a return to remote learning as COVID cases rise, which means more disruptions to what schools provide: stability, connections to resources like food, counseling, peer support, and a routine for many students. The ongoing uncertainties have impacted teens in different ways, with some feeling more isolated or developing symptoms of depression and anxiety. We're going to hear now from a couple of high school students about what life's been like since the start of the pandemic 2 years ago, and two experts who specialize in teen health. Welcome to Elena Stanisi, a high school senior in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, and Sean Zarate, also a senior from Pomona, California. Dr. Janice Whitlock, Senior Advisor for the JED Foundation, which aims to protect the emotional health of teens, and Dr. Anisha Abraham, a pediatrician specializing in adolescent medicine at Children's National in Washington, D.C. Thanks to you all for joining me. Elena, let's start with you. You had a good setup at home for remote learning, and then later a hybrid schedule. What was it like adapting to lack of typical structure in your school experience?
It was definitely really difficult to manage all of my classes, and it kind of just led to a lot of like self accountability and having to do that to be able to learn and succeed in school. And it was definitely like really isolating as well, not being able to compete in athletics, go to my clubs, all the things that I was used to doing with the normal schedule.
When you returned to school, was it like flicking on a switch where you were able to easily readjust to being in person with everyone again?
When I went back to school, I didn't really want to conform to the rules and, what they were telling me. I didn't want to I just wanted to be my own thing pretty much.
Elena, you struggled with an eating disorder that was diagnosed before the pandemic. What did all the disruptions and uncertainty do to your recovery process?
Yeah, it definitely made it really challenging for me. And I actually experienced a relapse at the beginning of the pandemic because of this lack of structure, which was always something that happened to me. And during the pandemic, we really saw, like, especially among teens, a craze about exercise and eating healthy during the pandemic across the whole country. And we really saw a rise in eating disorders, which impacted me as well.
Now, Sean, you lost two extended family members to COVID. How did that impact you and the vibe in your house?
It was almost like if everybody was torn apart. There's like anti-vaxxers in my family. There's people who want to stay safe, and then there's just the children caught in the middle who just need support and all that. And so a lot of fractures, a lot of fights and everything. It was really hard. Yeah.
Sean, one of the activities you started after returning to in-person school was to work as a peer counselor to help younger classmates. What is that like? What are you hearing from them?
They're really having a tough time. So those key transitioning years, those are really like the years, we would actually, be spending with other people, figuring out ourselves and figuring out how to deal with, our problems, with one another. But having to go through COVID and dealing with all those problems alone, you only figure out how to deal with them yourself. And so they're really estranged to having help from someone.
There seems to be more people having challenges.
Yeah.
Elena, is that what you think, that maybe there are more teens struggling now?
Before the pandemic, people could use sports, play practice, etc., to get their mind off of things that were going on either at home or just, the constant struggle of your mind. But when people found themselves isolated and being home alone and unable to use these coping strategies, I think it really led to a lot of like self-reflection and realizing, hey, maybe I'm not okay in this area.
Even if, people can stay connected through social media, like the ratio to how many people actually reach out to one another is like extremely low. And I know because like I'm usually the one always checking up on my friends, and they're always telling me, oh, I've never told anyone, but I haven't told anyone this, and this and that, so and so, and I'm like, dang, I'm here for you, bro, like.
The idea that people can paint their picture however they want it to look and make it look like they're living a happy, perfect lifestyle. And I think that this leads to a lot of people feeling like they have to put on a mask, suppress their struggles. And this leads to so much of why people aren't talking about, what's going on.
I want to bring in our experts now, Dr. Janice Whitlock of the JED Foundation. Elena shared that her battle with an eating disorder intensified. What other symptoms cropped up in kids?
Boy, pretty much anything that could crop up that was already there, whether it was exaggerated, already present, or in a latent form. So we're seeing a lot of depression and anxiety, self-harm, and a lot of sort of collateral and sort of similar kinds of things, higher levels of ADHD and hyperactivity in younger kids. Pretty much any acting out or in phenomenon that we noted before COVID, before the pandemic, is worse.
Dr. Abraham, you work extensively with teens as a pediatrician. Back at in-person school, Sean noticed that kids had adapted poorly to being alone. They weren't relating to peers as naturally. What's going on there? Had teens missed those key adolescent opportunities to learn social and coping skills?
Well, a very normal part of adolescence is actually becoming more independent from parents and certainly having more time with one's peers. So young people are really missing that opportunity, that normal developmental milestone of interacting with their friends, and it can certainly affect them in terms of their relationships, their interactions, and so on.
What about social media? When is this an acceptable substitute for connection?
Well, I certainly think that there is a place for social media. A lot of the young people that I've worked with tell me that using social media has been a good way for them to connect with their friends, certainly with family members, perhaps with people that they're not able to see and connect with in a usual way. But I will also say that we have seen an increase in certain behaviors with young people that are using, for example, Snapchat or TikTok or other forms of social media on a regular basis. For example, in my work with young people that have eating disorders, we've seen that there's an increase in kids that have, for example, binge eating related behaviors when they spend more time on certain social media platforms. So I would say that if a young person's spending a lot of time on social media, and particularly on certain forms of social media, and they're having increased depression or anxiety or other mood-related issues, then certainly cutting back on social media or being aware of what they're doing can be really important.
Are a lot of kids going on about their lives, perhaps not getting the help they need?
Disruptions in support systems are going to be particularly profound for kids who are already struggling or who are already in some tough situations. And I think we most worry about those young people. And that's one of the reasons the only thing I'd add is, like, if you have a young person in your life, whether they're a child or not, please reach out, please check in, keep an eye on them, especially if you know that they have had other sort of vulnerabilities or adversities.
Dr. Abraham, when should caregivers turn to prescription medication to help their teen cope?
Well, I would certainly say the first step, as we've been talking about, is just checking in with a child or teenager to see how things are going, and certainly to look for some of the warning signs that would include, again, being more clingy, being more irritable, not sleeping well, not eating well, maybe even referring to the fact that they don't want to be around anymore, anything that, again, may be concerning or a red flag. Certainly the next step after that, as we've discussed, is the importance of trying to be able to see a care provider and certainly have them assess for whether or not they might be depressed or anxious. In many cases, young people, when they are getting support, whether it's through counseling or, again, seeing an adult on a regular basis and certainly perhaps getting counseling support, they may do better. In some cases, young people may benefit from being on a medication as well. I would say this is, again, the minority of young people that I work with, but there are some patients that can benefit from being on a medication as well. It's also really important to know about family history. And certainly if there's, for example, a mother or father or aunt or someone else that struggled with issues related to depression or anxiety, then a child or teenager is at higher risk. And in some cases, again, medication may be part of that treatment.
How can we help teens build resilience?
Well, to some degree, life is helping them right now. This is, you don't know you're resilient until you meet something that you need to be resilient in the face of. And so here we are. To do more, I think it's really helpful to help young people deal with emotion. So just allow themselves to have it, to allow themselves to experience it, to be with it, not to have to vanquish it or otherwise sort of get rid of it. And then help them to vocalize the things that they're experiencing and feeling, give words to their experiences and their frustrations and their challenges, and then to find healthy outlets for the energy, that the anxious energy that we all have. I mean, there's just a lot of that around right now. So finding ways to move their bodies, to engage their creative senses, to do something that feels generative, productive, and healthy, and not just distracting. For example, hours and hours on social media is not a good idea. Spending lots and lots of time watching movies and shows can be calm feeling for a moment, but it's not authentically soothing. So helping young people understand what they can do that does authentically help them feel a little bit better. Those are three things that adults can do that can really make a difference.
And Sean, you've turned to making more music during the pandemic?
I found that it really helped because, like Elena said before, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of, realizations. So, with that, I was able to just like really speak my feelings and emotions onto a beat and just put it out there into the world, which is like, talking to someone. And it's cool to know that other people feel the same way I do because, everyone has something going on. Everyone always has a problem and no one is ever just okay. We all have a struggle.
Hmm. And with these struggles, Elena, what do you think people around kids can do better? Caregivers, adults, teachers, how can they better support you and your peers?
Honestly, just normalizing it and normalizing that it is okay to struggle with mental health, because I think such a big part of the problem is that it's been so hidden. And, I think a huge part of that is a generational thing. And we're definitely making a lot of progress, but just, parents, guidance counselors, teachers, administrators, anyone, just letting students know that they have outlets that they can talk to. Starting, I think the peer mentoring thing Sean is doing is a great thing, things like that, just to help people feel like they're not alone.
All right. Well, on that encouraging note, I want to thank students Elena and Sean for sharing, and our thanks to Dr. Janice Whitlock and Dr. Anisha Abraham for their time. I'm Mabel Jong. You've been watching Health Day Now.